close your eyes and try to imagine the sheer, breathtaking vastness of time. If we were to take the entire 4.5 billion year history of our planet and compress it into a single 24-hour day, human beings wouldn't even step onto the stage until the final few seconds before midnight. For almost the entire day, the Earth was just a massive, spinning globe waiting in the dark. For generations, we have looked up at the glittering night sky, searching the infinite cosmic ocean, and asked ourselves one lonely question. Are there aliens out there? We scan the stars for signals and wonder if visitors from another world will ever arrive. But what if we have the story completely backward? What if the greatest plot twist in the history of the universe is that the spark of life did not magically ignite in some warm, muddy puddle right here on Earth? What if the original blueprints for every forest, every creature in the deep ocean, and every human walking the street actually fell from the stars? Tonight we are going to explore a mind-bending yet entirely scientific reality, the possibility that we are the extraterrestrials we have been searching for. Before we dive deeper, ignite that like button. Tell me in the comments where you are listening from, what time it is there. The visuals are here to add context, but they aren't necessary to follow along. So get comfortable, let go of the day, and let your mind drift. We are about to rewind the clock billions of years, embarking on a gentle journey across the cosmos to uncover the true, ancient origins of life itself. To truly begin this journey, we must first gently untangle a story that almost all of us have carried since childhood. If you were to open a standard middle school science textbook, turn to the chapter on the origins of life, and run your finger down the glossy pages, you would find a very specific, widely accepted narrative. It is a story that has been told for decades, and it goes something like this. Picture our Earth roughly 4 billion years ago. It was not the serene, breathtaking blue and green marble we know today. It was a chaotic, terrifying and deeply hostile newborn world. For millions of years, the surface was a churning sea of molten rock. Volcanoes erupted violently and constantly, spewing thick, toxic clouds of sulfur and carbon dioxide into a dark, heavy sky. There was no oxygen to breathe, no soil to plant in, and certainly no gentle oceans. It was a planetary furnace. But eventually, as all things do, the Earth began to cool. The thick, angry clouds finally condensed, and it began to rain. It rained for millions of years, a torrential planetary downpour that filled the deep, jagged scars of the Earth's crust, slowly forming the very first oceans. According to the traditional scientific narrative, these ancient oceans were essentially giant, simmering pots of chemical-rich water. Scientists often refer to this as the primordial soup. The story asks us to imagine a shallow, muddy puddle on the edge of one of these hot, toxic oceans. Inside this puddle, basic, non-living chemical elements, carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, were drifting around aimlessly in the dark. Then the theory goes, a massive, violent lightning storm rolled across the sky. A bolt of lightning struck that exact muddy puddle, sending a massive jolt of electricity through the water. By pure, blind, unimaginable luck, that surge of energy caused the dead chemicals to suddenly fuse together in the exact right sequence, sparking the very first living, breathing, microscopic cell. From that single, incredibly lucky accident in the mud, every living thing on Earth slowly evolved. It is a dramatic story. It is a story of triumph against impossible odds. But as we drift deeper into the night, I want you to look closely at that story and ask yourself, does it really make sense? Think about the sheer, staggering complexity of even the simplest living cell. A single microscopic cell is more complicated than a modern city. It has power plants, waste disposal systems, communication networks, and a central library holding a massive blueprint of genetic code. The idea that random chemicals could just bump into each other, get struck by lightning, and magically assemble into a living, functioning machine is mathematically baffling. It is often compared to a tornado sweeping through a junkyard, picking up thousands of pieces of scrap metal and accidentally assembling a fully functioning, perfectly tuned passenger airplane ready for takeoff. Sure, if you have an infinite amount of time, perhaps the impossible becomes mathematically possible. But here is the secret that keeps geologists and biologists awake at night. Earth did not have an infinite amount of time. The timeline simply does not add up. When we look deep into the oldest layers of rock on our planet, we find something astonishing. Almost the very moment the Earth cooled down enough for liquid water to exist, life was already here. It appeared almost instantly in the grand geological timeline. There wasn't a long, slow period of billions of years where chemicals were patiently trying to assemble themselves in a puddle. The airplane was already built and flying the moment the junkyard cooled down, the cake baked entirely too fast. This glaring mystery is what forces us to look up from the muddy puddles of Earth and turn our gaze toward the stars. It forces us to embrace a much older, much more sweeping and profoundly beautiful concept. Let us leave the violent, boiling primordial soup behind for a moment. Instead, I want you to picture something incredibly simple, peaceful, and familiar. Imagine a quiet, sunlit meadow on a lazy afternoon. The air is still. In the middle of this vast expanse of green grass stands a single dandelion. It has finished its bright yellow phase and has transformed into that delicate, white, fluffy globe that we all know so well. Now imagine a cool, sudden breeze sweeping across the meadow. You know exactly what happens next. The invisible wind catches the delicate white threads of the dandelion. It gently plucks the tiny seeds from their stem and lifts them high into the air. Those tiny seeds begin to drift. They float gracefully across the meadow, carried away from their home. Some of them will drift for miles. Now let's think about what those seeds actually are. They are tiny, self-contained biological packages. They hold the complete, complex blueprint required to create a brand new dandelion. The seed does not need to invent itself. It does not need to randomly assemble its own DNA from scratch. It is already fully formed and ready to live. As the wind scatters them, the vast majority of these seeds will land in places where they cannot survive. They will drift onto paved concrete roads, they will land on the hard roofs of houses, or they will be lost in the salty waves of the ocean. In those places they will simply dry up and fade away, but a few of them, just a lucky microscopic fraction, will eventually drift down and settle into a patch of soft, damp, incredibly fertile soil. When that happens, the seed does what it was designed to do. It senses the moisture, it senses the nutrients, it anchors itself into the dirt, unfurls, and begins to grow. A new dandelion blooms miles away from its parent, completely bypassing the need to invent itself from the ground up. It simply needed a place to land. This peaceful, rustic image of the dandelion is the perfect way to understand the hypothesis we are exploring tonight. This concept is called panspermia. The word itself carries a beautiful ancient weight. It comes from ancient Greek. Pan means all or everywhere, and sperma means seed. Literally translated, it means seeds everywhere. Panspermia is the bold, elegant idea that the entire universe operates exactly like that quiet, sunlit meadow. It suggests that the cosmos is not a sterile, dead vacuum. Instead, it is a vast, swirling ocean filled with the seeds of life. According to this hypothesis, we need to completely redefine our understanding of our own planet. Earth was never a magical kitchen where the complicated recipe of life was cooked from scratch in a muddy puddle. Earth was simply the soft, damp, fertile soil. Imagine the early universe, billions of years before our solar system even existed. Somewhere out in the unimaginable depths of the cosmos, perhaps life had already bloomed. And just like the dandelion, the universe has its own invisible winds. It has its own mechanisms for scattering biological material. Comets, asteroids, and drifting clouds of stardust act as the ultimate delivery vehicles, carrying microscopic, frozen seeds of life through the dark, silent void. These cosmic seeds drift for eons. They pass dead stars. They sail through glowing nebulas, and they cross the empty gulfs between solar systems. Most of them will crash into dead, frozen moons. Most will be incinerated in the fiery atmospheres of gas giants. Most will wander the endless dark forever. But roughly 4 billion years ago, a gentle rain of these cosmic seeds drifted into our newly formed solar system. They found a small, rocky planet that had just cooled down from its fiery birth. This planet had liquid water. It had warmth from a yellow sun. It was the perfect patch of cosmic soil. When the seeds landed in the oceans of the early Earth, they did not need to wait for a miraculous lightning strike. They didn't need to spend billions of years randomly bumping into elements. They were already equipped with the blueprints of biology. They simply unpacked their luggage, soaked in the warm, nutrient-rich waters, and began to multiply. If we view our origins through the lens of panspermia, it changes everything about how we see ourselves. We are not a lonely, statistical anomaly that accidentally crawled out of the mud. We are a continuation. We are part of a grand, sweeping biological tapestry that stretches across the Milky Way. It means that the universe is inherently creative. Life is not an isolated glitch in the matrix. It is a fundamental feature of the cosmos, constantly trying to spread, trying to find new shores to wash up on. But embracing this beautiful idea requires us to answer a terrifying question. The dandelion seed is carried by a gentle breeze. The cosmic seed, however, must travel through outer space, and space is a nightmare. It is a freezing, airless, highly radioactive void that instantly destroys living tissue. How could any biological creature, no matter how small, possibly survive a journey lasting millions of years in the absolute harshest environment imaginable? To understand how the seeds cross the great dark ocean without dying, we have to look closely at the most rugged, indestructible, and bizarre little travelers hiding right here on Earth. We have to look at the ultimate hitchhikers. As we drift further into the quiet depths of our cosmic story, we must confront a reality that seems, at first glance, completely insurmountable. If the seeds of life are truly scattered across the universe, drifting like dandelion spores on the interstellar wind, they must cross oceans of unimaginable peril. The space between the stars is not a gentle, flowing river. It is a vast, silent, and terrifyingly hostile abyss. To understand the sheer magnitude of this journey, we have to strip away the comforts of our home planet. Here on Earth, we are wrapped in a thick, warm blanket of atmosphere. It provides the pressure that keeps our blood flowing, the oxygen that fuels our lungs, and an invisible magnetic shield that deflects the lethal radiation of the sun. But the moment you step beyond that fragile blue shell, the rules of reality change entirely. Outer space is a perfect vacuum. There is no air, which means there is no atmospheric pressure. Without pressure, the water inside any living cell would instantly boil and vaporize, tearing the delicate biological machinery apart. Furthermore, the temperature in the deep interstellar void plunges to near absolute zero, hundreds of degrees below freezing. It is a cold so profound, so absolute that it stops the very vibration of atoms. And if the cold and the vacuum were not enough, the universe is flooded with invisible, high-energy cosmic rays and ultraviolet radiation, lethal bolts of energy that slice through organic tissue and shatter the complex ladders of DNA into useless microscopic confetti. By all the conventional rules of biology that we observe in our daily lives, a trip through the naked vacuum of space should be an immediate, inescapable death sentence. And yet the Panspermia hypothesis suggests that life finds a way. It does not do so by fighting the vacuum, but by hiding from it. To cross the great dark ocean, these microscopic cosmic travelers do not float exposed in the emptiness. They hitchhike. They travel in the ultimate, ancient, heavily armored spaceships. Scientists call this specific mechanism Lithopanspermia. The word litho is derived from ancient Greek, simply meaning stone or rock. Lithopanspermia is the beautiful, dramatic theory that life travels across the galaxy, hidden deep inside asteroids, meteors, and comets. Let us close our eyes and visualize the epic, violent birth of one of these stone chariots. Imagine a distant, vibrant alien world, perhaps located on the other side of the Milky Way galaxy, billions of years before our own sun began to shine. This planet is lush, wet, and teeming with primitive, microscopic organisms. These tiny creatures thrive in the shallow, mineral-rich pools and deep, warm oceans of their home world. They are completely unaware of the infinite universe stretching out above them. Suddenly a shadow falls across their sky. A massive rogue asteroid wandering blindly through the star system collides with the planet. The impact is catastrophic. The sheer kinetic energy of the collision is so incredibly powerful that it vaporizes the asteroid and shatters the planet's crust. Millions of tons of dirt, water, and solid bedrock are blasted violently upward. The force is so immense that chunks of the planet's surface act like projectiles fired from a planetary cannon, breaking right through the invisible chains of gravity. They pierce the atmosphere and are thrown out into the cold, silent, pitch-black void of outer space. Inside one of these ejected rocks, deep within the microscopic cracks and pores of the stone, billions of those primitive, single-celled organisms are suddenly trapped. In the blink of an eye, they have been evicted from their warm, comfortable oceans and violently thrust into the harshest environment in existence. But this is where the miracle of Lithopanspermia begins. The rock itself becomes a fortress. The outer layers of the stone take the brunt of the cosmic radiation, acting as an impenetrable, millions of years old radiation shield. As the moisture inside the stone's microscopic caverns flashes into ice, the trapped microbes do not perish. Instead, they do something utterly extraordinary. They surrender to the cold, they shut down their metabolism, pull the remaining water from their fragile cells, and enter a state of deep, perfect, dreamless hibernation. They press the pause button on life itself. For millions, perhaps hundreds of millions of years, this frozen, silent arc tumbles through the infinite darkness of the galaxy. It is a lonely, microscopic speck, sailing past glowing nebulas and dying stars, waiting for the day it might cross paths with the gravity of a new, welcoming sun and fall like a blazing shooting star into the warm oceans of a young Earth. This cinematic journey might sound like pure science fiction, a fantasy spun to make us feel connected to the stars. You might be asking yourself, is it truly biologically possible for any living creature to survive being frozen solid in a radioactive vacuum for 1 million years? To find the answer, we do not need to look through a telescope. We simply need to take a quiet walk into a damp, shaded forest right here on Earth, kneel down and look closely at the soft green moss growing on the bark of an old tree. Hidden inside that damp moss is a creature so unbelievably resilient, so fundamentally bizarre that it pushes the absolute limits of what we consider biology. It is an animal that seems almost over-engineered for our planet, possessing biological superpowers that it would never practically need unless it was preparing for a journey to the stars. Meet the tardigrade. Most people know them by their much gentler, more endearing nickname, the water bear. If you were to place a tiny droplet of water from that forest moss under an electron microscope, you would see a creature that looks like a microscopic, chubby, 8-legged gummy bear. They move slowly, swimming with a clumsy, gentle rhythm. They are completely harmless, feeding on plant cells and bacteria. In their normal, active state, water bears are fragile, water-loving creatures. But the Earth can be a cruel place. Puddles dry up. Winters bring deep, freezing ice. When a water bear's environment suddenly turns hostile, when the water evaporates and the heat rises or the cold becomes unbearable, the tiny creature does not panic, and it does not die. Instead, it activates an ancient, almost magical biological defense mechanism known as cryptobiosis. Cryptobiosis literally translates to hidden life. When the moisture around the water bear disappears, the creature begins to pull its 8 legs inward, curling its microscopic body up into a tiny, tight, dry ball that scientists call a ton. But the true magic happens inside its body. If a human were to lose all the water in their cells, the cells would collapse, tear, and die instantly. The water bear prevents this by manufacturing a highly specialized sugar and a unique suite of proteins. As the water leaves its body, these sugars and proteins flood the empty space, essentially turning the internal structure of its cells into a matrix of biological glass. In this dry, glass-like state, the water bear's metabolism drops to less than 1/100th of 1% of normal. It stops eating, it stops growing, it stops aging. It becomes, for all practical intents and purposes, indestructible. Scientists have subjected these dormant, microscopic barrels to horrors that would instantly obliterate any other form of life on the planet. They have dropped them into pots of boiling water at temperatures well over 300 degrees Fahrenheit. They have frozen them in liquid helium, bringing them down to just a fraction of a degree above absolute zero, the coldest temperature physically possible in the universe. They have placed them inside pressure chambers and crushed them with weights 6 times greater than the crushing, lightless depths of the Mariana Trench at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. In every single experiment, the water bears simply endured. They waited in the dark. And the moment scientists placed them back into a gentle drop of room-temperature water, the biological glass dissolved. The creatures uncurled, stretched their 8 tiny legs, and went right back to clumsily swimming around as if they hadn't just survived the apocalypse. But the ultimate, undeniable proof of their cosmic potential came in September of 2007. A team of curious researchers working with the European Space Agency decided to put the Panspermia hypothesis to the ultimate physical test. They gathered a container filled with thousands of these dry, dormant water bears, packed them onto the Photon M3 spacecraft, and launched them high into Earth's orbit. Once the spacecraft was floating in the cold, silent void of outer space, the scientists did the unthinkable. They opened the payload bay and exposed the dormant water bears directly to the naked vacuum of space. For 10 long days, these microscopic earthlings were subjected to the absolute worst the universe has to offer. They sat in the total vacuum, devoid of oxygen and pressure. They were baked by the extreme, unfiltered ultraviolet radiation of the sun and frozen by the freezing shadows of space. They were bombarded by cosmic rays that should have shattered their DNA into millions of irreparable pieces. When the spacecraft finally returned to Earth and the capsule was recovered, the scientists carefully brought the container back to the laboratory. They added a few drops of water to the dry, irradiated dust. To the absolute astonishment of the scientific community, the water bears woke up. Not only did they survive a 10-day spacewalk without a spacesuit, but they continued to live normal lives. Many of them even went on to lay healthy eggs, producing a new generation of water bears that showed no ill effects from their terrifying interstellar journey. They possessed internal repair mechanisms so incredibly advanced that they simply stitched their own radiation-shattered DNA back together in a matter of hours. When we look at the water bear, we are forced to ask a quiet, haunting question. Evolution is a highly efficient, practical process. Animals on Earth only evolve defenses against the specific threats they face in their natural environment. There is absolutely no place on the surface of the Earth that gets as cold as the deep vacuum of space. There is no place on Earth that blasts creatures with the deadly naked solar radiation found outside our atmosphere. So why does a tiny, moss-dwelling creature wear an indestructible spacesuit underneath its skin? Why is it perfectly engineered to survive a journey it should never, theoretically, have to take? If we listen to the gentle whispers of the Panspermia hypothesis, the answer becomes breathtakingly clear. The water bear has these extreme defenses because these traits were forged in the crucible of space. They are the evolutionary leftovers, the deep, ancient genetic memories of a time when their distant ancestors had to survive a brutal, millions of years-long journey locked inside a frozen meteor. They don't just act like microscopic astronauts, they might be the direct descendants of the original cosmic pioneers. The survival of the water bear proves, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that the stone chariots of Lithopanspermia are a viable way to travel. The biological hardware exists, the delivery trucks are real, and knowing that life can survive the long, dark journey through the void, we are naturally led to look around our own celestial neighborhood. If Earth was not the birthplace but merely the destination, then where did our specific meteor come from? To find our true, ancient homeland, we only need to look up at the night sky toward a rusty, red point of light that was once a beautiful blue paradise. If we accept the beautiful, haunting premise that the seeds of life can survive the long, dark, and freezing journey through the cosmic void, a new and profoundly exciting question gently rises to the surface of our minds. If Earth was not the birthplace of biology, but merely the fertile soil where the seeds finally landed, then where did our specific seeds come from? Where was the original garden? To find the answer, we do not need to build a starship. We do not need to look through giant telescopes at distant, swirling galaxies millions of light years away. We simply need to step outside on a clear, quiet night, look up into the velvety blackness of our own celestial backyard, and find a tiny, steady point of rusty red light. We need to look at Mars. Today, if you were to ask an astronomer to describe the red planet, they would paint a picture of an absolute, undeniable and freezing wasteland. Mars, as we see it right now through the lenses of our satellites and robotic rovers, is a deeply hostile, dead desert. Its atmosphere is incredibly thin, less than 1% of the thickness of Earth's atmosphere. Because the air is so thin it cannot hold on to any heat from the sun, the surface is constantly blasted by deadly, unfiltered solar radiation. There is no liquid water flowing on its dusty, rocky surface today. Any water that remains is permanently locked away in solid, dirty ice caps at the poles or buried deep underground. Looking at that silent, frozen red desert, the idea that it could be the ancient, vibrant homeland of all terrestrial life seems utterly impossible. It feels like looking at a dried, brittle leaf and trying to imagine a towering green forest. But time, as we are learning on this journey, is a master of disguise. To understand the true relationship between Earth and Mars, we must once again rewind the grand cosmic clock. We must travel back roughly 4 billion years to the very dawn of our solar system. In its infancy, our solar system was a violent, chaotic, and beautiful place. A massive, swirling disk of gas and dust slowly collapsed under its own gravity to form the young sun, and the leftover debris gathered together to form the planets. Earth and Mars were born from the exact same cloud of stardust at the exact same time. They are, in a very real sense, planetary siblings. But there is one crucial, fundamental difference between the two, a difference that changed the entire destiny of biology. Size. Earth is a massive, heavy sphere of rock and iron. Mars, on the other hand, is only about half the size of Earth, and it has only about 10% of Earth's total mass. In the grand mechanics of the cosmos, size dictates temperature. Imagine taking a small cup of boiling hot coffee and a massive, heavy-gallon jug of boiling hot coffee and setting them both outside on a freezing winter night. The small cup will lose its heat and turn icy cold much, much faster than the large jug. Planets operate on the exact same thermodynamic principle. 4 billion years ago, both Earth and Mars were glowing, molten balls of liquid magma, fresh from the violent collisions of their birth. But because Mars was so much smaller, it radiated its heat out into the cold vacuum of space much faster. Mars cooled down and solidified while Earth was still a raging, boiling, toxic sea of fire. Because Mars cooled down first, it won the cosmic race to become a habitable world. It had a massive head start. Let your mind drift back to that ancient era. If you were to float above Mars 3.5 billion years ago, you would not see a red, dusty globe. You would see a breathtaking, vibrant world wrapped in fluffy white clouds. You would see a thick, heavy atmosphere rich in carbon dioxide, acting like a warm, comforting greenhouse blanket that trapped the heat of the young sun. Beneath those clouds you would see water, not just a few puddles, but vast, deep, glittering blue oceans covering the northern hemisphere. You would see rain falling from the Martian sky. You would see mighty rivers cutting through the rocky canyons, rushing down from the highlands and emptying into massive freshwater lakes. We do not have to guess about this watery past. We have sent robotic explorers like the Perseverance rover to a specific location on Mars called Jezero Crater. The rover is driving there right now because from orbit, Jezero Crater looks exactly like a dried-up river delta. Billions of years ago, a powerful river flowed right through the crater wall, slowing down and depositing rich, fertile mud and clay, exactly like the Mississippi River does on Earth today. For hundreds of millions of years, while Earth was still far too hot and violent to support even the simplest chemistry, Mars was a serene, watery paradise. It possessed every single ingredient necessary to brew the magic of life: warm liquid water, rich organic minerals, a thick, protective atmosphere, and a stable, temperate climate. If life was going to naturally spark into existence anywhere in our young solar system, it did not happen on Earth. The very first primordial soup was brewed in the ancient warm lakes of Mars. But as we know, the story of Mars is a tragedy. The very thing that allowed Mars to cool down quickly and give birth to life, its small size, was also its ultimate doom. Deep inside Earth, our massive, spinning core of liquid iron acts as a planetary dynamo, generating a colossal magnetic field that reaches far out into space. This invisible magnetic shield wraps around our planet, protecting our fragile atmosphere from the solar wind, a relentless, highly destructive stream of charged radioactive particles constantly blowing from the sun. Mars once had a spinning liquid core and a protective magnetic shield too, but because Mars is small, its internal fires eventually burned out. The core cooled down and froze completely solid. When the heart of the planet stopped spinning, the magnetic shield simply switched off. Without its invisible armor, Mars was completely defenseless. Over the course of millions of years, the vicious solar wind brutally attacked the planet. It slowly, systematically stripped the thick, warm Martian atmosphere away, blowing the air out into the dark void of deep space. Without the heavy pressure of the atmosphere to hold it down, the beautiful blue oceans began to aggressively boil away, evaporating into the thin air, while the remaining water froze solid into the dirt. The planet slowly suffocated, dried up, and died. But the death of a planet is a slow process. It takes millions of years. And during that long, agonizing twilight, the life that had already flourished in the Martian soil, the microscopic, resilient bacteria, did what life always does. It tried to survive. It retreated deep underground, hiding in the microscopic cracks of rocks, waiting in the dark. And then the universe provided an escape route. During this ancient era, the solar system was still a chaotic shooting gallery. Massive, stray asteroids frequently slammed into the surface of Mars. When a large enough asteroid strikes a planet with low gravity and a rapidly thinning atmosphere, the explosion is so incredibly powerful that millions of tons of Martian rock are violently blasted completely off the planet. These rocks, carrying the dormant, sleeping, freezing microbes deep inside their stony hearts, were ejected into the dark ocean of space. The great migration of Lithopanspermia had begun. Billions of tiny, rocky lifeboats carrying the last biological legacy of a dying world were set adrift on the solar winds. Millions of years passed. The rocks tumbled in the cold, silent dark. Many drifted into the sun and burned. Many were lost to the infinite void. But a few of those rocks, caught in the invisible gravitational currents of the solar system, drifted toward a newly cooled blue planet. They drifted toward Earth. To understand that this is not just a poetic fairy tale, we must fast forward billions of years to a cold, blindingly bright day in the late 20th century. The year was 1984. A small team of bundled-up, freezing scientists were riding snowmobiles across the vast, pristine, alien landscape of the Allen Hills in Antarctica. Antarctica is the greatest meteorite hunting ground on Earth. Because the continent is a solid, endless sheet of pure white ice, any dark rock sitting on the surface did not come from the ground below. It fell from the sky above. On December 27th, the team spotted a strange greenish-grey rock sitting alone on the ice. It weighed about 4 pounds and was covered in a dark, glassy crust, the undeniable scar of a fiery trip through Earth's atmosphere. They carefully bagged the rock, labeled it ALH84001, and sent it back to the laboratory. For years it sat in a cabinet, just another piece of space debris. But when geologists finally sliced the rock open and analyzed the tiny, microscopic pockets of gas trapped deep inside the stone, they were utterly stunned. The chemical signature of the gas did not match Earth's air. It did not match the gas found in normal asteroids. The mixture of carbon dioxide and rare isotopes was a perfect, identical fingerprint of the atmosphere of Mars. The rock sitting in their laboratory was a piece of the red planet. It had been blasted off Mars by an asteroid impact 15 million years ago, tumbled through deep space, and crashed into the soft Antarctic ice about 13,000 years ago. But the true shock came in 1996, when a team of NASA scientists placed a tiny slice of ALH84001 under an incredibly powerful electron microscope. Deep inside the ancient Martian stone, nestled within the microscopic cracks, they found something that made the entire world hold its breath. They found tiny, perfectly formed, microscopic structures. They looked exactly like segmented tubes and swimming worms. To the trained eyes of microbiologists, they looked exactly like fossilized, petrified bacteria. They also found tiny crystals of a mineral called magnetite. On Earth, these specific, highly pure crystals are almost exclusively manufactured by living, biological bacteria. The rock was packed with organic, carbon-based molecules, the fundamental building blocks of biology. NASA held a historic press conference announcing to the world that they had found highly compelling evidence of ancient, fossilized alien life inside a rock from Mars. The announcement sparked a massive, ongoing scientific debate. Skeptics argued that the worm-like structures could possibly be formed by strange, non-biological chemical reactions caused by the heat of the asteroid impact. They argued that the rock might have been contaminated by Earth bacteria while it sat on the ice in Antarctica. To this day, the debate over ALH84001 rages on in the halls of academia. But whether that specific rock holds the definitive, smoking gun proof of alien fossils, or just the tantalizing chemical shadows of a habitable past, it proved something far more profound. It proved the mechanism. It proved that a rock can be safely blasted off the surface of Mars, survive millions of years in the deadly vacuum of outer space without its core being melted, and safely crash land on the surface of the Earth. It proved that the delivery system of Lithopanspermia is a physical, undeniable reality. When we hold a piece of Mars in our hands, we are holding a messenger from the deep past. It tells us a story of a beautiful, tragic world that blossomed with rivers and rain long before Earth was ready. It whispers the possibility that as Mars slowly died, it sent its biological children out into the dark, hidden in stone, hoping they would find a new home. If this gentle, sweeping narrative is true, then the tree of life did not grow from a single, lonely seed on a single, lonely planet. It was transplanted. When we look up at the red dot in the night sky, we are not looking at a strange, alien wasteland. We are looking at our first home. And when we look in the mirror, we might just be looking at the distant, evolved descendants of Martian refugees, thriving on a new world, completely unaware of the unimaginably long and perilous journey our ancestors took to get here. Up until this quiet moment in our journey, we have imagined a universe governed entirely by the cold, blind winds of mathematical chance. We have pictured a random meteor striking the ancient blue oceans of Mars. We have visualized a frozen, lonely rock tumbling blindly through the silent, pitch-black void of space for millions of years until, by a stroke of pure, unimaginable astronomical luck, it crossed paths with the gravitational pull of the young Earth. It is a beautiful, sweeping story. But as we lay here in the quiet dark, thinking about the unfathomable, staggering distances between the stars, we must acknowledge a difficult truth. Space is infinitely, terrifyingly vast. The space between solar systems is so overwhelmingly empty that the odds of a single, blind stone accidentally hitting a tiny, perfectly habitable blue dot are incredibly, almost impossibly low. It is like standing on the shore of the Atlantic Ocean, throwing a single grain of sand into the wind and hoping it lands exactly on a specific blade of grass on the other side of the world. But what if luck had absolutely nothing to do with it? What if the delivery of life to our primordial oceans was not a random accident of celestial pinball? What if, instead of being a cosmic coincidence, the arrival of biology on Earth was a deliberate, calculated, and deeply intentional act? To explore this profound, mind-bending idea, we must temporarily step away from the astronomers staring through their telescopes. We must instead introduce a man who spent his life looking inward, staring down into the microscopic, hidden universe of our own bodies. His name was Dr. Francis Crick. If you were to open a history book, you would find Francis Crick's name etched in the absolute highest echelons of scientific achievement. In the year 1953, alongside his colleague James Watson, Crick unmasked the greatest biological mystery in human history. He co-discovered the structure of the DNA molecule. Shutterstock Cambrian Crick was the man who first mapped the elegant, twisting, glittering double helix that sits at the center of every single living cell. He realized that this microscopic, twisting ladder was not just a chemical structure, it was a library. It was an incredibly dense, highly sophisticated instruction manual written in a 4-letter biological alphabet. It is the software code that tells a seed how to become a towering redwood tree and tells a collection of cells how to become a human heart. For this monumental discovery, Francis Crick was awarded the Nobel Prize. He was universally recognized as one of the most brilliant, analytical minds of the 20th century. And yet, decades after his groundbreaking discovery, as doctor, Crick continued to stare deeply into the breathtaking complexity of the genetic code. A quiet, nagging doubt began to creep into his brilliant mind. He looked at the timeline of the Earth. He knew that shortly after our planet cooled down from its molten, fiery birth, life appeared almost instantaneously in the geological record. He looked at the sheer, overwhelming sophistication of DNA. It is a biological software program so advanced, so flawlessly engineered, that even today's most powerful supercomputers struggle to fully replicate its efficiency. Crick found it incredibly difficult to believe the traditional story. He found it mathematically absurd to think that random, dead chemicals floating in a warm, muddy puddle could accidentally bump into each other and write such a flawless, intricate software program from scratch in such a short amount of time. It was too perfect. It was too fast. The blueprint did not look like the messy result of random trial and error. To the man who discovered it, DNA looked completely, undeniably engineered. In 1973, Francis Crick, alongside a brilliant chemist named Leslie Orgel, published a scientific paper that sent absolute shockwaves through the quiet halls of academia. They proposed a daring, revolutionary hypothesis called directed panspermia. They suggested that the seeds of life were not blown here by accident. They proposed that life was purposefully, intentionally sent to Earth by a highly advanced, ancient, extraterrestrial civilization. To truly grasp why a Nobel Prize-winning scientist would suggest an idea that sounds like the plot of a science fiction novel, we must close our eyes and engage in a grand, cinematic thought experiment. We must try to put ourselves in the minds of a super-advanced alien race. Imagine a distant, ancient star system located perhaps on the other side of the Milky Way galaxy, billions of years before our own sun ever ignited. Picture a civilization that has reached the absolute pinnacle of evolution and intelligence. They have cured every disease. They have mastered the deep laws of physics. They have built a beautiful, peaceful, utopian world of glittering, silent cities that perfectly harmonize with their natural environment. They are wise, ancient, and brilliant. But no matter how advanced a society becomes, no matter how deeply they understand the universe, they cannot outrun the brutal, unforgiving mechanical laws of the cosmos. Everything that has a beginning must eventually have an end. Imagine that the astronomers of this ancient world make a terrifying, irreversible discovery. Perhaps their home star is running out of its internal nuclear fuel, swelling into a massive, angry red giant that will soon swallow their entire planetary system in a wave of apocalyptic fire. Or perhaps a wandering, invisible black hole is silently drifting into their solar system, its immense gravity threatening to slowly tear their beautiful planet apart. They are facing the ultimate, absolute extinction. They have only a few hundred years left before their world, and their entire history is completely erased from the universe. The leaders, the philosophers, and the greatest scientists of this doomed world gather to find a solution. Their first desperate instinct is to build massive, sprawling metal space arcs, giant colony ships designed to evacuate their population. But as they crunch the numbers, they quickly realize the harsh, undeniable truth of interstellar travel. The distances between the stars are simply too vast. To travel to the nearest habitable solar system would take tens of thousands of years. Sustaining millions of fragile, hungry, biological bodies on a spaceship for thousands of generations requires an impossible amount of energy, water, and artificial life support. The massive arcs would inevitably fail. They would become silent, floating tombs lost in the dark. The ancient aliens come to a heartbreaking, profound realization. They cannot save themselves. They cannot save their physical bodies, their cities, or their individual lives. They are going to die. But as they stare up at the night sky, facing their inevitable end, they decide that they will not let their story vanish entirely. If they cannot save the painting, they will save the paint. If they cannot save the cake, they will save the recipe. This is the absolute genius of directed panspermia. Why try to transport 1 billion heavy-breathing adult aliens across the unimaginable gulf of space when you can simply pack all of the necessary genetic information into a container the size of a single grain of sand? DNA is the ultimate indestructible biological hard drive. A single microscopic drop of DNA can store hundreds of thousands of terabytes of data. So our dying alien civilization completely shifts its strategy. They abandon the giant colony ships. Instead, their brilliant engineers design something entirely different. They build microscopic, uncrewed, automated space probes. These tiny vessels are marvels of advanced nanotechnology. They are forged from hyper-advanced, non-corrosive alloys designed to perfectly deflect deadly cosmic radiation. They are built to endure the absolute freezing zero of deep space for hundreds of millions of years without degrading. Inside these heavily shielded microscopic vaults, the aliens carefully, lovingly pack their final payload. They do not pack full-grown creatures. Instead, they pack the fundamental, essential building blocks of their own biology. They pack highly engineered frozen microbes. These are not random bacteria. They are essentially biological starter kits. They are specially designed to survive a long frozen slumber, automatically wake up when they detect liquid water and a warm temperature, and kickstart the long, beautiful process of evolution. Because these microscopic probes are so incredibly small, and because they require almost no energy to propel, the dying civilization does not just build one, they build millions of them, perhaps billions. They load these tiny, glittering seeds into massive electromagnetic railguns, pointing them up at the sky. And in their final act of defiance against the dying of the light, they fire them out into the dark, cold galaxy in every possible direction. It is a cosmic shotgun blast. It is a desperate shower of dandelion seeds cast into the interstellar wind. They know that the vast, overwhelming majority of these tiny vessels will fail. Most will fly directly into the burning hearts of other suns. Most will crash onto dead, airless, frozen moons. Most will drift forever in the infinite, silent night. But they are playing the ultimate patient numbers game. By firing billions of seeds into the dark, they mathematically guarantee that eventually, somewhere in the vastness of time and space, one of those tiny, automated lifeboats will strike the jackpot. Millions of years pass. The ancient alien world burns, turns to dust, and fades into silent memory. Their cities are gone, their names are forgotten, but their seeds continue to drift through the quiet dark. And then roughly 4 billion years ago, in a quiet, unassuming corner of a spiral galaxy, one of those tiny, glittering, microscopic probes enters the gravity well of a young yellow star. It falls silently through the thick, carbon-heavy clouds of a newly cooled, barren planet we call Earth. It plunges deep into the warm, primordial ocean. The pod detects the presence of liquid water. It detects the gentle warmth of the sun. The automated systems, dormant for eons, quietly trigger. The protective shell dissolves, and the highly engineered alien microbes are released into the rich, nutrient-heavy waters of our world. The seeds have been planted. From those initial carefully engineered seeds, the grand sprawling tree of terrestrial life begins to grow. The microbes divide, they evolve into multicellular organisms. They become the fish in the sea, the reptiles on the land, the birds in the air. And eventually, billions of years later, they evolve into creatures that look up at the stars, build telescopes, and wonder where they came from. If directed panspermia is the true reality of our existence, it completely, fundamentally shatters our understanding of our place in the universe. It means that we are not a lucky accident born from mud and lightning. It means we are a legacy. We are the surviving backup drive of a long-lost civilization that refused to fade quietly into the dark. It means that the spark of life was a gift, a carefully wrapped package sent across the impossible void by an ancient intelligence that desperately wanted the beautiful story of biology to continue. When we look at the intricate, perfectly spiraling ladder of our own DNA, we might not just be looking at chemistry. We might be reading the final microscopic love letter from an orphaned world, a message that says, "We were here, we lived, and now so do you." As we lay here, safely wrapped in the quiet, comforting dark of our own bedrooms, it is very easy to think of panspermia as a ghost story from the deep, unimaginably distant past. We imagine those frozen meteors, those dormant alien microbes, and those microscopic, engineered probes as ancient relics, arriving billions of years ago when the Earth was still a steaming, lifeless canvas. We think of the cosmic delivery system as something that happened once, long ago, and then simply stopped. But the universe does not stop. The grand, silent clockwork of the cosmos is always turning. The solar system is currently hurtling through the Milky Way galaxy at a staggering speed of 450,000 miles per hour. We are on a journey driving through an incredibly vast, invisible ocean of cosmic dust, wandering comets, and rogue debris. What if the rain of cosmic seeds never actually stopped falling? What if the delivery trucks are still driving through our neighborhood right now, completely unnoticed? To understand that the universe is still actively visiting us, we have to look at two profoundly strange, mysterious events that happened not billions of years ago, but within our own modern lifetimes. Let us travel first to the middle of the vast, quiet Pacific Ocean. The year is 2017. Imagine the Haleakala Observatory perched high on the silent, dormant, volcanic peaks of Maui, Hawaii. The air up there is incredibly thin, crisp, and cold. Far above the light pollution of the cities, the night sky is a breathtaking canopy of diamond dust. A powerful telescope known as Pan-STARRS is quietly scanning the heavens, taking pictures of the dark void, searching for near-Earth asteroids. On October 19, the astronomers looking at the data noticed a tiny, faint blip of light. It was moving incredibly fast. As they tracked its trajectory, they realized with a sudden, breathtaking shock that this object was not orbiting our sun. It was moving far too quickly to be bound by the gravity of our solar system. By tracking its path backward, they realized it had plunged down from the space above our solar plane, coming from the general direction of the star Vega. It swung around our sun like a slingshot and was already hurtling back out into the deep interstellar void, never to return. It was the very first confirmed interstellar object ever observed by human eyes. It was a visitor from another star system. The Hawaiian astronomers gave it a beautiful, poetic name, Oumuamua. In the Hawaiian language, it roughly translates to the scout or the messenger from afar arriving first. But the fact that it came from another star was not the strangest thing about Oumuamua. The true mystery was its shape and its behavior. When astronomers use telescopes to look at comets and asteroids, they generally expect them to look like round, chunky potatoes. But as they measured the light reflecting off Oumuamua as it tumbled through the dark, they realized it had an impossible, highly bizarre shape. It was either shaped like a flattened pancake, or more likely, it was a long, dark, red, metallic-looking cylinder. It was shaped almost exactly like a massive, tumbling cigar, perhaps a quarter of a mile long. There are no known natural processes in the formation of solar systems that easily create long, perfectly cylindrical rocks. And then it did something that defied all expectations. As Oumuamua passed the Sun and began to head back out into deep space, it sped up. In physics, a rock tumbling through a vacuum should only be influenced by gravity. As it moves away from the massive pull of the Sun, it should naturally slow down. But Oumuamua accelerated. It was as if something gave it a gentle, invisible push. Now, normal icy comets do this sometimes. As they get close to the hot Sun, the ice inside them melts and shoots out as a jet of steam, acting like a natural rocket engine. But telescopes looked closely at Oumuamua, and there was absolutely no tail. There was no cloud of gas. There was no dust. There were no natural rocket jets. It was a solid, dry, dark object, and yet it was pushing the gas pedal. This anomaly was so profound that Dr. Avi Loeb, the former chair of the astronomy department at Harvard University, published a highly controversial paper. He suggested that we must seriously consider the possibility that Oumuamua was not a natural rock at all. He proposed that its flat or cylindrical shape and its strange acceleration perfectly matched the physics of an artificial solar sail, a piece of advanced extraterrestrial technology designed to ride the pressure of starlight. Or perhaps it was a dormant, interstellar biological arc, drifting quietly through the galaxy, passing through our solar system like a silent ghost ship in the night. Whether Oumuamua was a highly engineered alien probe or simply the strangest, most bizarre piece of rock we have ever seen, it fundamentally proves one of the most critical requirements of the Panspermia hypothesis. It proves beyond any shadow of a doubt that solid objects can and do cross the vast, unimaginable gulfs between the stars. The interstellar delivery vehicles are real and they are passing right through our front yard. But what happens when one of those interstellar visitors doesn't just pass by? What happens when one of them hits the Earth's atmosphere? To explore this, we must bring our journey back down to the surface of our planet. Let us leave the cold, snowy peaks of the observatory and travel to the warm, lush, deeply green landscape of Kerala, a state situated on the tropical Malabar coast of southern India. The time is the summer of 2001. In Kerala, the summer brings the monsoon season. It is a time of heavy, rhythmic, incredibly peaceful rain. The people of Kerala are deeply accustomed to the torrential downpours that water the towering palm trees and rich agricultural fields. It is a normal, comforting rhythm of life. But the morning of July 25th was not normal. High above the tropical clouds, a loud, terrifying sonic boom suddenly shattered the morning peace. The explosion was so powerful that it rattled the windows of houses and made the ground tremble. It was accompanied by a blinding flash of light. A meteor had entered the Earth's atmosphere and violently exploded in the high stratosphere. A few hours after the sonic boom, the dark clouds gathered and the heavy monsoon rains began to fall once again. But as the people stepped outside, they looked down at their hands and their clothes in absolute shock. The rain was not clear. It was a deep, dark, shocking crimson red. It looked exactly like blood falling from the sky. The red water collected in puddles, stained the white clothes drying on lines, and turned the leaves of the trees a rusty, unnatural color. This bizarre blood rain did not just happen once. It continued to fall intermittently across the region for over 2 months. Initially, the government and local scientists tried to offer a comforting, mundane explanation. They suggested that the high-altitude winds had simply swept up a massive cloud of red desert sand from the Arabian Peninsula, carried it across the ocean, and mixed it with the rain clouds. Or perhaps, they said, it was just a massive bloom of microscopic red algae lifted from the local lakes by a waterspout. But to one local physicist named Dr. Godfrey Louis, those explanations did not make sense. Sand does not stay suspended in rain clouds for 2 months. And a waterspout could not explain the deafening sonic boom that preceded the rain. Dr. Louis began to collect buckets of the strange red water. He took it back to his laboratory, carefully placed a few drops onto a glass slide, and peered through the lens of a powerful microscope. What he saw, looking back at him, defied everything he knew about biology. He did not see jagged grains of desert sand. He did not see the familiar, recognizable shapes of terrestrial algae or fungal spores. Instead, he saw millions of perfectly formed, thick-walled, spherical biological cells. They were uniform in size. They had a deep red pigment inside a thick outer envelope. Fascinated and deeply unsettled, Dr. Louis sent samples of the red water to laboratories around the world, including the Cardiff University Centre for Astrobiology in the United Kingdom. As scientists subjected these strange red cells to rigorous testing, the mystery only deepened. First, they searched for DNA, the universal barcode of all life on Earth, but when they used standard chemical tests designed to highlight DNA, they found nothing. The red cells either completely lacked DNA or their genetic structure was so fundamentally different, so completely alien to Earth's biology, that our instruments could not even recognize it. Yet despite seemingly lacking normal DNA, these cells were clearly biological. They were observed dividing and replicating, multiplying exactly like living bacteria do. But the most staggering, terrifying, and fascinating revelation came when the scientists decided to test the absolute limits of these mysterious red cells. They wanted to see what it would take to kill them. On Earth, we have extreme bacteria known as extremophiles that live in boiling volcanic hot springs at the bottom of the ocean. But even the absolute toughest Earth bacteria have a hard biological limit. If you raise the temperature above 122 degrees Celsius, about 250 degrees Fahrenheit, their proteins unravel, their cells burst, and they die. It is a strict rule of terrestrial biology. The scientists placed the red cells from the Kerala rain into a pressurized autoclave, a machine designed to sterilize medical equipment by using intense, superheated steam. They slowly raised the temperature. They passed 100 degrees Celsius, the boiling point of water. The cells were perfectly fine. They passed the maximum limit for Earth life, 122 degrees. The red cells did not die, they continued to turn up the heat. They pushed the temperature to a staggering, unimaginable 300 degrees Celsius, nearly 572 degrees Fahrenheit. At this temperature, lead begins to melt. Wood spontaneously bursts into flames. Every known biological organism on the planet would be instantly incinerated into ash. But inside the pressurized chamber, the red cells did not burn. They did not burst. In fact, under the extreme heat and pressure, the cells actually became more active. They began to divide and reproduce even faster. They were thriving in an environment that should have been an absolute biological hell. Dr. Godfrey Louis eventually published a scientific paper presenting a hypothesis that sounded like it belonged in a science fiction movie, but was backed by years of careful laboratory data. He proposed that the sonic boom heard that July morning was the sound of a small, fragile, icy comet exploding in the upper atmosphere. This comet, he suggested, was acting as a Lithopanspermia delivery vehicle. It was carrying a frozen payload of extraterrestrial extremophile spores. When the comet violently exploded, it shattered into microscopic dust, releasing trillions of these alien spores into the high stratosphere. As they drifted down, they mixed with the dark monsoon clouds over India. When the rain finally fell, it washed these highly engineered, heat-resistant alien cells down onto the quiet, tropical towns of Kerala. The scientific community remains fiercely divided over the red rain. Many scientists still argue strongly that the cells must be a highly unusual yet undiscovered form of earthly algae. But to this day, no one has been able to definitively match the red cells to any known species on our planet, nor fully explain how a terrestrial organism could evolve to survive temperatures that would melt a soldering iron. When we place the tumbling, strange anomaly of Oumuamua next to the mysterious, heat-proof red cells falling from the sky over India, a beautiful, haunting picture begins to emerge. It reminds us that the Earth is not a closed, sealed bubble. We do not live in an isolated, sterile quarantine. The roof of our world is open to the endless sky. The interstellar winds are always blowing, and the cosmic dandelion seeds are still drifting through the dark. Some pass us by, moving too fast to catch, and some, perhaps, are still gently falling, quietly mixing with our rain, waiting to find their place in the ongoing, ever-expanding story of life on Earth. As we gently close the chapter on microscopic red cells falling from the tropical skies of India and silent cigar-shaped rocks tumbling through the darkness of our solar system, we must prepare to dive into a different kind of ocean. We have spent a great deal of time looking up at the vast, starry expanse. Now I want you to imagine standing on the edge of a quiet, moonlit beach. Listen to the rhythmic, soothing sound of the waves rolling onto the sand, pulling back and rolling in again. It is the oldest lullaby on Earth. When we think about the history of life developing in those deep, dark waters, we are usually taught to imagine a very slow, very patient process. The traditional story of evolution, first beautifully outlined by Charles Darwin, is a story of tiny, microscopic changes adding up over billions of years. It is a slow, steady climb up a towering mountain. Imagine a simple, single-celled organism slowly becoming a cluster of cells, which slowly becomes a soft sponge, which slowly, over countless eons, becomes a fish. Darwin believed that nature does not make sudden leaps. It is a smooth, continuous, unbroken chain of gentle adaptations. But if we look closely at the ancient pages of the fossil record written deep in the stone of our planet, we find a chapter that completely breaks this rule. It is a moment in time that deeply troubled Darwin himself. Let your mind drift back roughly 540 million years ago to a period geologists call the Cambrian era. Before this moment, the Earth's oceans were, to be quite honest, incredibly simple and quiet. For over 3 billion years, the only life that existed was microscopic slime, simple algae, and flat, soft-bodied organisms that blindly floated in the currents. And then, almost overnight in geological terms, the quiet ocean violently exploded with complexity. Over a period of just a few million years, a mere blink of an eye in the grand timeline of the cosmos, the oceans were suddenly filled with a terrifying and beautiful array of advanced creatures. Suddenly, the fossil record is flooded with animals wearing thick, armored shells. We see the very first jointed legs crawling across the ocean floor. We see the development of the first sharp, predatory jaws. We see the sudden appearance of complex nervous systems, and perhaps most miraculously, we see the sudden opening of the first biological eyes, looking out into the ancient water for the very first time. This magnificent sudden burst of life is known as the Cambrian Explosion. It was not a slow, steady climb up a mountain. It was an elevator rocketing to the top floor. It is as if the biological software of the Earth suddenly received a massive, unexplained, high-definition upgrade. If we view this sudden explosion of complexity through the lens of the Panspermia hypothesis, a breathtaking new possibility emerges. What if this wasn't just Earth's local biology working over time? What if the Cambrian explosion was not the result of slow terrestrial evolution, but the result of a massive cosmic shipment? What if a fleet of icy comets crashed into the ancient oceans, delivering not just simple, single-celled bacteria, but highly advanced genetic payloads, complex, ready-to-use biological blueprints from an older, far more evolved star system? To understand how serious and how deeply unsettling this theory can be, we do not need to look at dusty, ancient fossils. We simply need to look at a creature that is currently swimming in the cool, dark waters of our modern oceans. It is an animal so unbelievably strange, so incredibly intelligent, and so genetically isolated from the rest of the tree of life that scientists have often looked at it and wondered if it actually belongs on this planet at all. Let us sink beneath the waves and meet the octopus. If you have ever watched an octopus glide silently through a kelp forest, you know that you are watching something that feels profoundly alien. They do not have bones. Their bodies are entirely soft, allowing a creature the size of a large dog to squeeze its entire body through a hole no bigger than a quarter. They have 3 separate beating hearts. When they bleed, their blood is not red. It is a deep, metallic blue because it relies on copper instead of iron to carry oxygen through their veins. But their physical body is only the beginning of the mystery. The true wonder of the octopus is its mind. An octopus does not have a single, centralized brain like a human, a dog, or a bird. Instead, its nervous system is distributed throughout its entire body. While it has a central brain shaped like a donut wrapped around its throat, the vast majority of its neurons, its thinking cells, are actually located in its 8 arms. This means that every single arm has its own independent brain. An octopus's arm can touch, taste, smell, and make complex decisions completely on its own, even if it is completely disconnected from the rest of the body. They are master problem solvers. They can unscrew jars from the inside. They can recognize individual human faces. They use tools, carrying coconut shells across the ocean floor to build mobile fortresses for themselves. And they possess an optical camouflage system that is so advanced, it defies belief. An octopus can look at a piece of coral and within a fraction of a second perfectly change not just the color, but the physical, three-dimensional texture of its skin to become completely invisible. For decades, biologists have marveled at the octopus, trying to figure out how such a profoundly complex, highly intelligent creature could have evolved from the simple, slow-moving sea snails and clams that are supposedly its closest genetic cousins. The leap in intelligence and physical capability is staggering. In the year 2018, the mystery deepened into a genuine scientific controversy. A massive, peer-reviewed scientific paper was published in the journal Progress in Biophysics and Molecular Biology. This was not a fringe internet blog. This was a serious academic paper authored by 33 highly respected scientists, researchers, and geneticists from institutions all around the globe. The paper was provocatively titled Cause of Cambrian Explosion, Terrestrial or Cosmic. These 33 scientists took a long, hard look at the newly sequenced genome of the octopus, and what they found shocked them. First, they realized that the genetic code of the octopus is staggeringly, almost unnecessarily massive. The octopus genome contains 33,000 protein-coding genes. To put that into perspective, you, a highly advanced, self-aware human being listening to this story, only have about 20,000 protein-coding genes. The octopus has vastly more genetic instructions than we do, but it was not just the size of the genome that baffled the researchers, it was how the octopus uses it. To understand this, we must use a simple metaphor. Imagine your DNA is a massive, incredibly detailed recipe book sitting in a grand library. When your body needs to build a protein, it sends a messenger, a molecule called RNA, to go into the library, perfectly copy the recipe from the DNA book, and bring it to the kitchen. In almost every single living creature on Earth, from the smallest bacteria to the largest blue whale, this rule is strictly followed. The RNA messenger is just a copy machine. It does exactly what the DNA book tells it to do, but the octopus does not follow this rule. The octopus engages in a massive, sweeping biological process called RNA-editing. Imagine that the RNA messenger goes into the library, looks at the DNA recipe book, and decides it doesn't like the recipe. Instead of just copying the text, the RNA takes out a red pen, crosses out words, adds new paragraphs, and completely changes the instructions on the fly before taking it to the kitchen. The octopus can literally edit its own genetic instructions in real time. If the ocean water suddenly turns freezing cold, the octopus does not have to wait thousands of years for its DNA to slowly evolve a resistance to cold. It simply edits its RNA messengers on the spot to immediately produce a new type of anti-freeze protein. It can customize its own nervous system to adapt to any environment in a matter of hours. This level of active, conscious genetic editing is virtually unheard of in the rest of the animal kingdom. It is a biological superpower. It is a level of sophistication that seems completely out of place on the slow, steady evolutionary tree of Earth. The 33 scientists who authored the 2018 paper looked at this staggering complexity, looked at the lack of intermediate fossils connecting the octopus to its simple ancestors and came to a stunning, deeply controversial conclusion. They proposed that the octopus did not entirely evolve on Earth. They suggested that the staggering complexity of the octopus genome, its massive library of genes and its advanced RNA editing software, could not have been written in the relatively short amount of time since the Cambrian Explosion. They argued that these genetic instructions must have been written somewhere else, on a much older, more advanced world, long before our solar system was even born. The paper officially proposed the concept of cryopanspermia. Imagine a massive, dark comet drifting through the outer edges of the solar system hundreds of millions of years ago. Deep inside the icy core of this comet, protected from the lethal radiation of deep space, was a payload of unimaginable value. It was not just carrying simple, single-celled bacteria. According to the scientists' hypothesis, the comet was carrying highly advanced, cryopreserved, fertilized eggs. Or perhaps it was carrying incredibly complex engineered retroviruses loaded with fully formed extraterrestrial DNA. When this icy comet eventually crashed into the warm oceans of the early Earth, the ice melted. The cosmic payload was released into the water. If it was a virus, it infected the early, simple squids of the Earth, rapidly rewriting their DNA, injecting the advanced octopus software directly into their primitive biology, forcing a massive, sudden mutation. But the paper went even further, suggesting a more direct, chilling possibility. They proposed that the comet simply deposited actual frozen octopus embryos into the terrestrial ocean. The warm water thawed them out. The eggs hatched, and the first true alien visitors to our world silently slipped out of their shells, stretched their 8 arms and vanished into the dark kelp forests of their new home. If this hypothesis holds even a fraction of the truth, it forces us to completely rethink the word alien. We have spent decades pointing massive radio dishes at the empty sky, waiting for a signal, waiting for a flying saucer to land on the White House lawn. We expect extraterrestrials to arrive in ships made of gleaming metal, propelled by fire and light. But the universe is far more patient and far more creative than our Hollywood movies. The universe does not need to build metal spaceships when it can build icy comets. It does not need to send adult astronauts when it can send frozen eggs. Perhaps the aliens have already been here for 500 million years. Perhaps they are swimming in our oceans right now, looking up at the surface with highly advanced, intelligent eyes, quietly waiting out the millennia in the silent, blue depths. If you want to see an extraterrestrial, you might not need to look through a telescope. You might just need to put on a diving mask, sink into the cool, dark water, and look under a rock. As we gently leave the cool, dark depths of the ocean and the silent, highly intelligent octopuses behind, let us drift back up to the surface. Let us step onto the solid, familiar ground of the continents. Breathe in the cool night air and look around at the world we think we know so perfectly well. We look at our sprawling cities, our towering skyscrapers of glass and steel, our massive bridges spanning wide rivers, and the endless miles of paved highways connecting it all. We look at the airplanes tracing silent white lines across the stratosphere. Looking at all of this magnificent human achievement, it is incredibly easy and deeply comforting to believe that we are the grand finale of the Earth's story. We have always cast ourselves as the ultimate, crowning achievement of a slow, 4 billion-year evolutionary climb. But if the Panspermia hypothesis is true, if the highly complex advanced seeds of life were delivered to this planet billions of years ago, then the biological oven has been turned on for an unfathomably long time. The ingredients for intelligence, creativity, and civilization have been sitting in the warm, fertile environment of Earth for hundreds of millions of years. This realization gently opens the door to a question that is both deeply humbling and slightly terrifying. It is a question that challenges the very core of our human ego. What if we are not the first? What if we are simply the latest tenants in a very old, constantly renovated house? What if, hundreds of millions of years before the first human ancestor ever picked up a stone tool, another species looked up at the exact same stars, built sprawling industrial cities, mapped the globe, and wondered if they were alone in the universe? In 2018, this exact question stepped out of the realm of late-night science fiction and into the serious, brightly lit halls of academia. Two brilliant scientists, an astrophysicist named Adam Frank from the University of Rochester and Gavin Schmidt, the director of NASA's Goddard Institute for Space Studies, published a fascinating, highly rigorous scientific paper. They called their thought experiment the Silurian Hypothesis. The name itself is a playful nod to a classic British science fiction television show, Doctor Who, which featured an ancient, advanced race of reptiles called the Silurians, who went into hibernation deep underground millions of years before humans evolved. But while the name is playful, the science behind the paper is deadly serious. To truly understand the Silurian hypothesis, we must first completely shatter our everyday perception of time. As humans, we have a very narrow, incredibly limited view of history. If we look at an ancient Roman aqueduct or the Great Pyramid of Giza, built roughly 4,500 years ago, we marvel at its incredible antiquity. We think of it as the deep, ancient past. But to the Earth, 4,500 years is not even a fleeting memory. It is a microscopic fraction of a millisecond. Modern human beings have only existed in our current physical form for about 300,000 years. We have only been using advanced industrial technology, burning coal, driving cars, and flying planes for a mere 300 years. Now compare that tiny, invisible sliver of human history to the grand timeline of the planet. The Earth has been supporting complex, walking, breathing life on land for over 400 million years. The mighty dinosaurs ruled this planet for a staggering 165 million years. To put that into perspective, the amount of time that separated the existence of the Stegosaurus from the Tyrannosaurus rex is actually greater than the amount of time that separates the Tyrannosaurus rex from you listening to this story right now. Time is an unimaginably deep, dark ocean. And in an ocean that deep, there is plenty of room for lost ships. Imagine, for a moment, a window of time deep in the Earth's past, say 60 million years ago, shortly after the asteroid wiped out the giant dinosaurs. The Earth recovered. The forests grew back, thicker and warmer than ever. Mammals and birds began to thrive. What if, in that incredibly vast expanse of time, a species of highly intelligent early mammals, or perhaps a descendant of the surviving raptor dinosaurs, evolved a highly complex brain? Imagine they discovered fire. Imagine they developed agriculture. Over tens of thousands of years, they built a globe-spanning civilization. They mined metals, they harnessed electricity, and they built massive, sprawling metropolises along the ancient coastlines. Imagine they existed thriving and polluting the atmosphere for 100,000 years. 100,000 years is a massive lifespan for an industrial civilization. It is over 300 times longer than human beings have been industrialized. And then, like all great empires, they fell. Perhaps they triggered a runaway climate change event that collapsed their food chain. Perhaps a rogue asteroid struck their beautiful world, or perhaps a deadly engineered pandemic swept through their dense cities. Whatever the cause, they went entirely extinct. The voices of their civilization went completely silent. If this grand, tragic alien empire rose and fell 60 million years ago, what would be left of them today for us to find? If we dug deep enough into the dirt, wouldn't we find the ruins of their towering skyscrapers? Wouldn't we find the rusty, twisted metal of their machines, or the fossilized bones of their philosophers? The shocking, deeply humbling answer that Adam Frank and Gavin Schmidt presented to the scientific community is absolutely nothing. We would find nothing at all. To understand why, we have to look at the Earth not as a silent, static museum, but as a ruthless, highly efficient, heavily grinding, crushing machine. Mother Nature is the ultimate, undefeated eraser of history. We love to look at our concrete cities and our steel bridges and think of them as permanent monuments to our greatness. But the Earth has no respect for our engineering. If humanity were to suddenly magically disappear tomorrow, the grand erasure of our existence would begin almost immediately. Within a few short decades, without humans to maintain the pumps, the subway tunnels of New York, London, and Tokyo would completely flood with dark, freezing water. Weeds, vines, and thick tree roots would violently tear up the paved highways, searching for sunlight and soil. Within a few centuries, the water would seep deep into the concrete pillars of our tallest skyscrapers. When winter came, that trapped water would freeze, expand, and shatter the concrete from the inside out. The massive steel beams exposed to the rain and the salty sea air would aggressively rust, oxidize, and literally bleed back into the earth. The glass windows would shatter, slowly grinding down into the simple white sand from which they were originally made. Within a few tens of thousands of years, the grandest cities of human history would be nothing more than gentle, overgrown mounds of unidentifiable dirt and rust, completely swallowed by the silent, green forests. But the true destroyer of ancient history is not the wind, the rain, or the creeping vines. The ultimate eraser lies deep beneath our feet in the terrifying, fiery mechanics of the planet itself. The solid ground we walk on is an illusion. The Earth's crust is not a permanent, unbroken shell. It is fractured into massive, drifting puzzle pieces called tectonic plates. These continental plates are constantly, silently floating on a massive, churning ocean of boiling liquid magma located deep in the Earth's mantle. Because the Earth is a sphere, these massive plates are constantly bumping into each other. Where two plates collide, a violent, unstoppable geological process occurs. One plate is ruthlessly forced underneath the other, dragging millions of tons of surface rock down into the dark, crushing, unimaginably hot depths of the Earth's interior. This process is called subduction. It acts exactly like a giant planetary conveyor belt. As the rock is dragged down into the mantle, it is subjected to thousands of degrees of heat. Everything on that rock, every mountain, every ancient riverbed, and every single trace of a hypothetical ancient civilization's ruined cities is completely incinerated. It is melted down into glowing red lava, completely wiping the hard drive of the planet clean. Eventually, That melted rock is spewed back out of volcanoes to form brand new, perfectly clean land. Over the course of a few 100 million years, almost the entire surface of the Earth is pulled underground, melted, and recycled. This means that if an advanced global civilization existed 200 million years ago, the very ground they walked on, the bedrock their cities were built upon, literally does not exist anymore. It has been swallowed by the fires of the deep earth. But wait, you might ask, sitting in the quiet dark. What about their bones? We have museums filled with the massive, towering skeletons of dinosaurs that lived hundreds of millions of years ago. Wouldn't we at least find the fossilized skeletons of these ancient, intelligent builders? This is one of the most common, fundamental misconceptions about how paleontology actually works. Fossilization is not a normal process. It is an incredibly, ridiculously rare, 1 in a billion set of miraculous circumstances. When an animal dies in the forest or on the plains, it does not turn into a fossil. Its body is quickly consumed by scavengers, broken down by bacteria, and its bones are scattered and turned to dust by the sun and the rain within a few short years. To become a fossil, an animal has to die in the exact right type of environment. It must be instantly buried in thick, oxygen-free mud or volcanic ash, completely sealing it away from scavengers and decay. And then, that specific patch of mud must remain perfectly undisturbed by earthquakes, erosion, or tectonic subduction for tens of millions of years, while the bone is slowly replaced by minerals. Of all the hundreds of millions of Tyrannosaurus rexes that roamed the Earth over a period of 2 million years, humanity has only ever found a few dozen relatively complete skeletons. The vast, overwhelming majority of all life that has ever existed on this planet vanished without leaving a single microscopic trace. Now apply this harsh mathematical reality to a highly advanced civilized species. Intelligent beings usually do not live in swamps or tar pits, which are the best environments for making fossils. They live in paved cities, they live on dry land. And more importantly, advanced cultures usually treat their dead with respect. They bury them in shallow, designated graves where groundwater quickly dissolves the bones, or they cremate them, intentionally turning their bodies to ash. If an ancient, highly intelligent civilization only existed for a brief, glorious period of 100,000 years, the window of time is so incredibly narrow and their living conditions so unconducive to fossilization that they could have easily lived, thrived, and died without leaving a single fossilized bone behind. The Silurian Hypothesis forces us to look in the mirror and completely reconsider our place in the long, dark timeline of the world. If the complex, perfectly engineered seeds of life were delivered to Earth billions of years ago through the silent, drifting mechanisms of Panspermia, the planet has had more than enough time to bake the recipe for intelligence more than once. It is entirely possible and mathematically plausible that the Earth has hosted several brilliant, tragic, and entirely forgotten civilizations before us. We are proudly walking across a massive planetary graveyard, completely unaware of the ghosts beneath our feet. We build our cities on top of the recycled, melted dust of ancient metropolises. We look up at the stars, wondering if we will ever hear a voice in the dark, without realizing that the Earth itself may have once echoed with the sounds of industry, art, and philosophy long before the first human took a breath. But if the crushing machine of the Earth has erased their buildings, melted their machines, and ground their bones to dust, How could we ever possibly know they were here? How do you find a ghost? The answer, as we will soon discover, does not lie in searching for ancient stones or rusty metal. To find the invisible builders of the past, we must stop acting like archaeologists and start acting like forensic chemists. If the crushing, relentless geological engine of the Earth has systematically ground down the ancient cities, melted the advanced machines, and turned the bones of hypothetical ancient civilizations to absolute dust, it leaves us standing in the dark, facing a seemingly impossible puzzle. If physical objects cannot survive the deep abyss of geological time, how could we ever possibly know if someone else was here before us? How do you find a ghost when the haunted house itself has been completely torn down and rebuilt a dozen times over? To solve this magnificent mystery, we must fundamentally change the way we look at the past. We must gently let go of the romantic image of the traditional archaeologist. We are not looking for a fedora-wearing explorer brushing the sand off a stone pyramid or digging up a rusty, ancient gear in the desert. To find an intelligence that existed 50 or 100 million years ago, we must stop looking for physical shapes. We must stop looking for architecture. Instead, we must become forensic chemists. We must look for the invisible stains left behind on the very fabric of the planet. Imagine, for a moment, the deepest, quietest parts of the ocean floor. Far away from the crashing waves and the sunlight, in the absolute freezing blackness, there is a constant, gentle snowfall. But this is not snow made of ice. It is a slow, endless rain of microscopic dust, dead algae and tiny shells drifting down from the surface over thousands and millions of years. As this marine snow hits the bottom, it slowly builds up, layer upon layer, millimeter by millimeter. Over unimaginable spans of time, the immense pressure of the water compresses this soft mud into solid, heavy rock. When a geologist looks at a sheer cliff face or drills a deep core sample into the Earth's crust, they are not just looking at a pile of rocks. They are looking at the pages of a massive, ancient diary. Every single layer of sedimentary rock has trapped the exact chemical composition of the Earth's atmosphere and oceans at the specific moment in time when that layer was laid down. If the air was suddenly filled with ash from a massive volcano, that ash is trapped in the rock. If the oceans suddenly turned highly acidic, the chemical signature of that acid is perfectly preserved in the stone. So if a highly advanced intelligent civilization blossomed from the ancient seeds of Panspermia hundreds of millions of years ago, what kind of chemical stain would they leave in the planetary diary? To answer this, we just have to look at ourselves. We have to look at what it actually takes to build a globe-spanning technological civilization. No matter how smart an alien species is or how peacefully they try to live, building sprawling industrial metropolises requires one fundamental thing: massive, overwhelming amounts of energy. If this ancient society was anything like us, they likely followed the easiest, most natural path to generating that energy. They dug into the ground, found the rich, dense remains of ancient plants and animals, and they burned them. They burned fossil fuels. When an industrial civilization burns millions of tons of coal, oil, or natural gas, they are doing something deeply unnatural. They are taking carbon that has been safely buried deep underground for millions of years and violently venting it back into the sky all at once. This is where the forensic chemistry becomes incredibly beautiful and precise. Not all carbon is created equal. There are different flavors of carbon, which scientists call isotopes. The two most common stable isotopes are carbon-12 and carbon-13. Here is the simple, elegant secret of biology. Living things are picky eaters. Plants, algae, and trees vastly prefer to absorb the lighter flavor, carbon-12, from the air to build their leaves and stems. Because fossil fuels are essentially just ancient, crushed-up plants, they are absolutely packed with carbon-12. If a massive global civilization suddenly industrializes and starts burning billions of tons of fossil fuels to power their factories and cities, they will flood the Earth's atmosphere with a gigantic, unnatural spike of carbon-12. This carbon eventually washes out of the sky into the oceans, settles into the mud, and gets locked into the sedimentary rock. Millions of years later, long after their cities have crumbled and their bones have melted in the mantle, a chemist examining a core sample of ancient rock would see something shocking. They would see a sudden, violent anomaly, a sharp, jagged spike in carbon-12 that appears almost instantly in the geological record, entirely out of nowhere, and then slowly fades away as the Earth's natural systems clean up the mess. It is the ultimate "we were here" footprint. And the most thrilling, unsettling part of the Silurian hypothesis is that when we look back into the deep diary of the Earth, we actually find these spikes. There are moments in the deep past where the chemistry of the entire planet went completely, inexplicably crazy. The most famous of these chemical ghosts happened roughly 56 million years ago. It is a deeply mysterious apocalyptic chapter in the Earth's history known as the Paleocene-Eocene Thermal Maximum, or the PETM for short. 56 million years ago, long after the dinosaurs were gone and early mammals were beginning to thrive in warm, lush forests, the Earth suddenly caught a massive fever. Over a relatively microscopic period of time, perhaps just a few thousand years, massive, staggering amounts of carbon were violently injected into the Earth's atmosphere. The global temperatures skyrocketed, the oceans became highly acidic, causing a massive global die-off of deep-sea life. The ice at the poles completely melted away, turning the entire planet into a sweltering tropical hothouse. Fossil records from the PETM show that the Earth became so incredibly warm that palm trees and alligators lived comfortably in the Arctic Circle. When scientists drill deep into the ocean floor and extract rock cores from 56 million years ago, they find exactly what you would expect to see if a civilization had suddenly burned every fossil fuel on the planet. They find a massive, towering spike of light, carbon-12. The isotope ratio of the entire world was suddenly and violently altered. Now, the traditional mainstream scientific consensus is that the PETM was caused by a natural disaster. Most geologists believe that a period of extreme volcanic activity in the North Atlantic essentially cooked massive underground deposits of organic material, or perhaps triggered the sudden melting of frozen methane at the bottom of the ocean, releasing a giant burp of carbon into the sky. But Adam Frank and Gavin Schmidt, the authors of the Silurian Hypothesis, gently ask us to pause and consider the alternative. They point out that the chemical fingerprint of the PETM, the sudden, massive spike of light carbon and the rapid global warming, looks exactly, flawlessly identical to the chemical fingerprint that human civilization is currently leaving on the Earth right now. If you were an alien scientist visiting Earth 50 million years from today, looking back at our current era, you would not see the Empire State Building, you would not see the Eiffel Tower or the Great Wall of China, you would see a thin, strange layer of rock with a massive, inexplicable carbon-12 spike. You would see the exact same thing we see when we look at the PETM. Could the PETM 56 million years ago actually be the exhaust fumes of an ancient Panspermia-seeded civilization that industrialized, overheated their planet, and then collapsed under the weight of their own runaway climate change? The carbon spike is the loudest chemical ghost, but it is not the only one we would look for. If an ancient species achieved high technology, they would leave other, even stranger, invisible stains in the dirt. Think about the sheer volume of synthetic materials we manufacture today. We have created millions of tons of plastics, complex artificial polymers that simply do not exist in nature. While a plastic water bottle might break down into microscopic fragments over a few thousand years, those microplastics do not just magically vanish from the universe. They settle into the ocean floor. Over 50 million years, the immense pressure of the Earth would compress that global layer of microplastic trash into a bizarre, paper-thin layer of highly unusual synthetic rock. A future geologist might discover a strange, microscopic vein of compressed polymers stretching across the globe, a silent testament to a species that invented artificial packaging. We would also look for the terrifying chemical footprint of nuclear power. If an ancient civilization split the atom, they would have created highly specific, unnatural radioactive isotopes. Elements like plutonium-244 or curium-247 are not naturally produced by the Earth in any significant quantities. They are the unique, undeniable signature of nuclear fission. Some of these isotopes have half-lives of millions of years. Even if an ancient civilization's nuclear reactors were pulverized to dust by glaciers and earthquakes, a sudden, inexplicable concentration of these radioactive elements in a specific ancient layer of rock would be a glowing, screaming beacon of high technology. Furthermore, we would look for the chemical signature of massive global agriculture. To feed a population of billions, a civilization must artificially synthesize nitrogen to use as fertilizer. Today, human beings pull millions of tons of nitrogen out of the air and pump it into the soil to grow crops. This excess nitrogen washes into the rivers and eventually flows into the oceans, completely altering the natural chemical balance of the water. An ancient global agricultural society would leave a distinct, unnatural spike in nitrogen isotopes locked deep in the coastal sedimentary rocks of their era. When we shift our perspective from the physical to the chemical, the Earth suddenly looks far less like a quiet, empty museum and much more like a heavily edited, deeply complex manuscript. It forces us to realize a beautiful, humbling truth about our own existence. We are currently living in a geological epoch that scientists are beginning to call the Anthropocene, the age of humanity. We feel so incredibly large and important right now, but in the grand, sweeping theatre of deep time, the entirety of human history, every war, every great work of art, every technological breakthrough, and every city we have ever built will eventually be compressed by the relentless weight of the planet. Millions of years from now, our entire existence will be reduced to a strange, colorful band of rock just a few inches thick, a faint anomaly of carbon, a whisper of plastic, and a slight shadow of radioactive dust. If our magnificent, noisy, brilliant civilization is destined to become nothing more than a quiet chemical ghost locked in the stone, then it is not just possible, but mathematically probable that we are walking on top of other ghosts right now. If the dandelion seeds of Panspermia landed here billions of years ago, the garden of Earth has had plenty of time to grow, bloom, and wither over and over again. But what if the memory of these ancient, pre-human civilizations was not completely erased? What if, somehow, the stories of the first builders, or perhaps the memories of the alien seed bringers themselves, survived the deep freeze of time? As we transition into the next chapter of our journey, we will step away from the cold, hard rocks of geology and look instead at the oldest, most haunting stories whispered by our own ancestors, looking for the echoes of the cosmic visitors who fell from the sky. As we step out of the sterile, brightly lit laboratories of modern chemistry and leave behind the microscopic search for carbon isotopes, let us transition into a different kind of darkness. Let us gather around the oldest, most fundamental human invention, the flickering light of a nighttime campfire. Before we had electron microscopes to peer into the DNA of octopuses, before we had massive drills to extract core samples from the ocean floor, and long before we had telescopes to track silent cigar-shaped rocks tumbling through our solar system, we had something else. We had our voices, we had the spoken word, we had stories. For thousands of generations, human beings have sat under the vast, glittering canopy of the night sky and passed down deeply sacred narratives from the elders to the young. We call these stories mythology. In our modern, highly industrialized world, it is incredibly easy to dismiss ancient mythology as nothing more than the imaginative fairy tales of primitive people who did not understand how the wind or the rain worked. We treat them as charming, fictional bedtime stories. But if we look at the Earth through the expansive, mind-bending lens of Panspermia and the Silurian Hypothesis, we must ask ourselves a profound question. How long can a memory truly last? If the Earth regularly violently crushes and melts its physical history, wiping away cities and bones, is it possible that the only things that can survive the terrifying abyss of time are ideas? What if the oldest myths of humanity are not fiction at all? What if they are the fragmented, deeply traumatized, and highly poetic memories of a time when the seed bringers actually walked among us? What if they are the cultural fossil record of the cosmic cycle? When anthropologists and historians look at the ancient world, they are constantly confronted by a beautiful and haunting mystery. If you travel across the globe examining completely isolated ancient cultures, cultures separated by vast, uncrossable oceans and towering mountain ranges, you do not find a random assortment of different stories. Instead, you find an eerie, spine-tingling repetition. You find the exact same story, told over and over again, wrapped in different languages, but holding the exact same core narrative. And that narrative almost never starts with life slowly crawling out of the mud. It almost always starts with a descent from the stars. To explore this, let us travel back to the very cradle of recorded human civilization. Let us walk into the sun-baked desert sands of ancient Mesopotamia, between the mighty Tigris and Euphrates rivers in what is now modern-day Iraq. Over 5,000 years ago, a mysterious and incredibly advanced people known as the Sumerians suddenly appeared in the historical record. The Sumerians did not seem to slowly evolve their culture. They suddenly blossomed. Out of nowhere, they invented complex mathematics, advanced astronomy, the wheel, sophisticated agriculture, and the very first system of writing, carving wedge-shaped symbols into wet clay tablets. When modern archaeologists translated those ancient clay tablets, they did not find stories of a slow, steady human triumph. They found the epic of creation. The Sumerians wrote with absolute conviction that they did not build their magnificent civilization by themselves. They claimed that all of their knowledge, their agriculture, and their very existence was a direct gift from a group of powerful beings known as the Anunnaki. The word Anunnaki is deeply fascinating. In the ancient Sumerian language, it roughly translates to those who from heaven to earth came. According to the oldest written records of humanity, the Anunnaki descended from the starry sky. They arrived on Earth, found it wild and untamed, and decided to bring order to the chaos. The clay tablets describe how these sky gods literally engineered the first human beings. They took the clay of the Earth, which we can easily interpret through a modern lens, as the raw, unevolved biological material of early hominids, and they mixed it with their own divine essence, or blood. If you look at this ancient story through the framework of directed panspermia, the parallels are absolutely breathtaking. The Sumerians were not describing magical spirit. They were describing, in the only vocabulary they had available, an advanced genetic engineering project. They were describing an extraterrestrial intervention. The Anunnaki were the seed bringers. They were the gardeners who arrived, found the fertile soil of our planet, spliced their own highly advanced DNA with the local biology, and intentionally accelerated the evolution of human consciousness. They brought the spark of the gods down to the mud, but the Sumerians were not the only ones holding on to this cosmic memory. Let us leave the deserts of Mesopotamia and travel east toward the lush, incredibly vibrant jungles and sweeping plains of ancient India. The ancient Sanskrit texts of India, the Vedas, the Mahabharata, and the Ramayana, are some of the most massive, complex, and deeply philosophical documents in the history of the world. And just like the Sumerian tablets, they are filled to the brim with beings descending from the cosmos. But the Indian epics add a layer of detail that is profoundly unsettling, perfectly echoing the terrifying concepts of the Silurian Hypothesis. In these ancient texts, the gods and ancient heroes do not just float on clouds. The texts provide highly detailed mechanical descriptions of incredible flying machines known as Vimanas. The descriptions of Vimanas do not sound like spiritual metaphors, they sound like flight manuals. The texts describe multi-level metallic chariots that roared into the sky with the sound of 1,000 thunders riding on pillars of fire and smoke. They describe massive, rotating gyroscopes, engines fueled by liquid mercury, and the ability of these machines to hover silently, travel across the globe in hours, and even fly out into the dark void of space itself. Even more terrifyingly, these ancient Indian epics do not just describe a peaceful, utopian age of advanced technology, they describe an apocalyptic fall. The Mahabharata tells the story of a massive, devastating global war between advanced factions, and the weapons they used sound nothing like the spears and bows of ancient history. The text describes the deployment of a weapon called the Brahmastra. Listen to the way the ancient scribes describe the detonation of this weapon, written thousands of years before humanity supposedly discovered the atom. It was a single projectile charged with all the power of the universe. An incandescent column of smoke and flame as bright as 10,000 suns rose in all its splendor. It was an unknown weapon, an iron thunderbolt, a gigantic messenger of death which reduced to ashes an entire race of people. The corpses were so burned they were unrecognizable, their hair and nails fell out, pottery broke without apparent cause, and the birds turned white. After a few hours, all foodstuffs were infected. To escape from this fire, the soldiers threw themselves into streams to wash themselves and their equipment. If you were to read that exact paragraph to a modern historian without telling them where it came from, they would tell you, without hesitation, that it is a first-hand eyewitness account of a nuclear bomb exploding over a city. The flash of 10,000 suns, the hair and nails falling out from radiation poisoning, the contamination of the food and water. It is a perfect, flawless description of atomic warfare. How could a culture existing thousands of years ago perfectly describe the exact mechanics and horrific aftermath of a nuclear blast? If we embrace the cyclical nature of the Earth, the answer is chilling. Perhaps they weren't inventing a story, perhaps they were remembering one, perhaps the ancient Indian epics are the fragmented, deeply traumatized cultural memories of a previous cycle of Earth, a Silurian civilization that rose to magnificent heights, built flying machines, unlocked the devastating power of the atom, and tragically burned their world to ash, forcing the remaining survivors back into the Stone Age to start all over again. And this brings us to the final, most haunting repetition in global mythology: the concept of the Great Reset. If you look across the globe, from the Sumerians in the Middle East, to the ancient Hebrews, to the Maya in Central America, to the indigenous tribes of North America, and the ancient dynasties of China, they all share one inescapable conclusion to their oldest stories. The seed bringers arrive, they bestow knowledge, civilization, and technology. The civilization grows, becomes arrogant, becomes corrupt, or becomes too noisy. And then the gods decide to wipe the slate clean. They initiate a global cataclysm. The most common iteration of this reset is the Great Flood. In the Sumerian epic of Gilgamesh, the gods decide to unleash a massive deluge to drown the world. In the Hebrew Bible, it is the story of Noah. In Hindu mythology, a king named Manu is warned of a coming flood that will destroy all life. In almost every variation of the story, a single individual is chosen and warned by a sympathetic creator. They are instructed to build a massive ark, a survival ship, and to gather the seeds of all living things, a male and female of every species, to preserve the biological blueprint of the planet while the Earth is violently washed clean. Look at that story through the eyes of an advanced extraterrestrial intelligence, or through the lens of directed panspermia. The Ark is not just a wooden boat filled with noisy animals. The Ark is a metaphor for a DNA vault. It is a biological seed bank. If an advanced civilization knows that a cyclical, planet-wiping disaster is coming, whether it is a natural asteroid impact, a severe shift in the Earth's tectonic plates, or an engineered nuclear war, their ultimate goal would be to preserve the software code of life. They would build an ark to protect the dandelion seeds, ensuring that when the floodwaters finally recede and the Earth cools down, the grand experiment of biology can immediately begin again. The myths of our ancestors are not just campfire entertainment. They are a profound, desperate warning and a beautiful promise. They tell us that time is not a straight line. It is a massive, slowly turning wheel. We are born, we build, we reach for the stars, and eventually the wheel turns and the crushing engine of the Earth resets the board. But the deepest comfort found in these ancient memories is that life is incredibly, fiercely resilient. The seeds are always saved, whether they are hidden inside an icy comet tumbling through the silent dark of space, packed into a microscopic engineered probe by a dying alien world, or carried on a wooden boat navigating the apocalyptic waves of a flooded planet. Life refuses to be extinguished. The memory of the seed bringers still echoes in our minds because we are their legacy. We are the survivors of the great floods and the cosmic impacts. We carry the memories of the stars in our DNA and the whispers of ancient, lost empires in our oldest songs. And as we finally approach the end of our journey tonight, we must look at our own place in this grand, beautiful cycle and realize that the role of the seed bringer is about to change hands. As our long, winding journey through the fathomless depths of time and the infinite, silent expanse of space gently comes to a close, I want you to bring your focus back to the present moment. Let go of the ancient, ruined cities, the icy comets tumbling through the dark, and the fiery skies of the distant past. Bring your awareness back to the quiet room you are resting in. Feel the soft, comforting weight of the blankets resting over you. Notice the gentle, rhythmic rise and fall of your own chest as you breathe. Take a slow, deep breath in, filling your lungs with the cool night air, and slowly, peacefully let it out. Tonight, we have unraveled the grandest, most beautiful mystery of our existence. We have looked past the boundaries of our sky and realized a profound, liberating truth. We are not isolated. We are not a lonely, statistical anomaly that accidentally crawled out of the mud on a forgotten rock. We are part of a massive, sweeping cosmic tapestry. If the Panspermia hypothesis is the true story of our world, then the Earth is not our absolute beginning, and it is certainly not our final end. It changes the way we must view our beautiful blue planet. The Earth is not a closed, locked room. It is a harbor. It is a brilliant, welcoming oasis, sitting on the edge of a vast, dark highway. For billions of years, the dandelion seeds of the cosmos drifted through the freezing, silent void, desperately searching for a place to rest. They endured the absolute zero of deep space, the searing radiation of dying stars, and the unimaginable loneliness of the interstellar ocean. And then they found this place. They found the warm, sunlit, mineral-rich waters of the early Earth. They unpacked their ancient, highly engineered blueprints, and they simply went to sleep, trusting that the fertile soil of this new world would allow them to finally bloom. When you look in the mirror tomorrow morning, or when you look at the people walking past you on the street, I want you to remember the incredible, almost impossible journey it took to create that moment. The iron flowing through your blood, the calcium fortifying your bones, and the complex twisting ladder of your DNA were not invented here. They were forged in the hearts of ancient, collapsing stars and carried across the void in chariots of stone and ice. We are, in the truest, most literal sense, the aliens we have spent centuries looking for. We are the descendants of cosmic immigrants. We are the passengers of the universe riding on a magnificent spinning blue spaceship. And as passengers, it is deeply comforting to realize that our time here is just a single, beautiful chapter in a much larger story. The universe operates on a scale of time that our minds can barely comprehend. The stars are born, they burn bright, and they fade away. Planets cool down, blossom with life, and eventually grow quiet. It is the natural, gentle rhythm of the cosmos. It is a cycle of continuous, unending creation. We are already beginning to write the next chapter of that cycle. Just as the ancient microbes fell from the sky to seed our oceans, humanity is now looking back up at the stars. We are sending our own tiny, robotic probes out into the dark. We are carrying the biological memory of Earth out to the frozen deserts of Mars and the icy moons of Jupiter. We are slowly, inevitably, transforming from the children of the cosmos into the new seed bringers. The wheel of time continues to turn, and the journey goes on. But for tonight, there is absolutely nowhere else you need to go and nothing else you need to do. Realizing our place in this vast, infinite universe should not make you feel insignificant. It should make you feel incredibly free. When you zoom out and look at the breathtaking scale of billions of years and billions of galaxies, the everyday stresses of our modern lives, the deadlines, the traffic, the trivial worries, suddenly become so beautifully small. They are just tiny, fleeting ripples on the surface of a deep, calm, ancient ocean. You do not need to carry the weight of the world on your shoulders. The Earth has been spinning for 4.5 billion years, and it will continue to spin safely and quietly through the dark. You are simply a traveler, taking a much-needed rest in a beautiful, warm harbour. So, as the night deepens, allow your mind to drift. Let go of the thoughts that anchor you to the waking world. Imagine yourself floating weightless in the quiet, peaceful expanse of space, surrounded by 1,000,000 distant, friendly stars. There is no cold and there is no fear. There is only a profound, enveloping silence. Let your muscles completely relax, sinking deeper and deeper into the mattress. Allow the gentle cosmic winds to carry you away from the shores of the waking world and guide you safely into the deep, restorative ocean of sleep. You are a child of the universe, and you have traveled so incredibly far, and now it is time to rest. Good night.